Welcome to UPRI Audiobooks. Tonight we open the gates to the Blood of Villa Noctis, a Gothic tale of forgotten bloodlines, ancient secrets, and a house that has waited centuries for its true master. Before we begin, if you enjoy immersive audiobooks and original stories, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new adventure. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and enter Villa Noctis. Some legacies never die, they wait. The Blood of Villa Noctis. Chapter 1. The House on the Hill. The rain had finally stopped. Golden afternoon sunlight spilled across the hills of northern Italy, turning the vineyards into rivers of emerald beneath a sky washed clean by the storm. The narrow mountain road twisted upward through ancient olive groves until the trees slowly gave way to towering cypress that stood like silent sentinels. Amdis watched the road disappear beneath the tires of the rental truck. "You nervous?" Rose asked with a smile. He glanced over at her. "I should be asking you that." She laughed. "We just bought a 400-year-old Italian villa that everyone said was haunted. You make questionable life choices." "I married you." He grinned. "Fair point." She reached across the seat and squeezed his hand. It had been 3 years since they had met in Atlanta. 2 years since they married. Neither had much money, neither came from wealth. When the listing for Villa Noctis appeared online, it seemed impossible. A sprawling Gothic estate, nearly abandoned, priced for less than a modest suburban home back in the United States. Every inspector agreed on one thing. The villa had good bones. The foundation was solid. The stone walls were flawless. The roof required repairs. The windows needed replacing. Years of dust covered every room, but structurally, it was magnificent. Everyone who saw the listing asked the same question. Why is it so cheap? No one ever gave a satisfying answer, only vague smiles, shrugs, or warnings that sounded more like old superstitions than facts. Rose rested her head against the window. "I still can't believe it's ours." Amdis looked ahead, far above the vineyards. He finally saw it. The villa. Even from nearly a mile away, Villa Noctis dominated the mountain. Dark stone, steep towers, massive arched windows. Weathered statues watched the valley below. It looked less like a house and more like a forgotten castle. For reasons he couldn't explain, his heart began beating faster. Not with fear, with recognition. He had never been here, yet something inside him whispered, "You've been gone a long time." He blinked. The feeling vanished. "You okay?" Rose asked. "Yeah. You looked somewhere else." "I guess I did." Neither noticed the old man standing beside the road. He watched the truck pass. Slowly. He removed his cap, made the sign of the cross, and whispered, "God help them." The village of San Lucian sat beneath the hill. Stone streets wound between homes older than most countries. Flower boxes overflowed from windows. Church bells echoed across the valley. People stopped what they were doing as the truck rolled through town. Conversation died. Children stared. Old women quietly crossed themselves. Several shopkeepers watched from their doorways. No one smiled. Rose leaned toward the windshield. "Why is everyone looking at us?" Amdis forced a laugh. "American plates? That's not American plate staring." "No, it isn't." They stopped outside a small grocery. As Amdis climbed from the truck, every voice inside seemed to disappear. The cashier, a woman in her 70s, looked past him toward the truck. Her eyes settled on the handwritten address taped inside the windshield. Villa Noctis. She grew pale. "You bought the house?" Amdis smiled politely. "We did." She stared for several seconds. Finally, she nodded. "I see." Rose waited. The woman said nothing else. Amdis asked gently, "Is something wrong?" "No, but..." The woman looked toward the hill. "Some places should be left to memory." Before Amdis could respond, another customer hurried between them. "Enough!" The man looked frightened, almost angry. "We do not speak of that place." Silence returned. The cashier quietly packed their groceries. As she handed Rose the bag, she slipped a small silver cross inside. Her voice was barely above a whisper. For your bedroom. Rose looked confused. I didn't order this. I know. We can't. Please. Her eyes filled with genuine concern. Take it. Rose thanked her. The old woman refused payment. Outside, a young delivery driver was loading his van. Amdis waved. Excuse me. The young man looked up. You know where Villa Noctis is? His expression changed instantly. I know where it is. Could you deliver building supplies there next week? The driver shook his head. I don't drive past the lower gate. I'll pay extra. It isn't about money. Then what is it? The young man hesitated. My grandfather delivered milk there. And he never came home. Amdis waited. The driver looked embarrassed. That's just what people say. So it isn't true. I didn't say that. He climbed into his van. Before closing the door, he looked directly at Amdis. If you're smart, leave before sunset. Then he drove away. Rose stood quietly beside the truck. I don't like this. Neither do I. But we're not turning around. No, she smiled. We've spent every dollar we own. Amdis laughed. I was thinking the exact same thing. They climbed back into the truck. Neither noticed several elderly villagers watching from the church steps. One old priest finally spoke. They do not know. An older woman answered softly. They never do. Another elder sighed. The covenant has been honored for generations. And now? The priest looked toward the hill where Villa Noctis stood against the darkening sky. Now! The house has called someone home. Far above the village, hidden behind centuries-old stone walls, one window slowly opened. Though no one stood there, it felt as if unseen eyes watched the truck climb the final road. Waiting, remembering, welcoming. And somewhere deep within the silent halls of Villa Noctis, a forgotten melody began to play. Chapter 2. The House That Waited. The iron gate stood open. Neither Amdis nor Rose remembered seeing them move. The truck rolled slowly between weathered stone pillars crowned with angels, whose faces had long since been worn smooth by centuries of rain. Beyond them stretched a winding drive nearly half a mile long. Ancient oak trees arched overhead, their branches weaving together into a tunnel that swallowed the afternoon sun. The deeper they drove, the quieter the world became. No birds, no crickets, no wind. Only the gentle rumble of tires over old stone. Rose lowered her window. Do you hear that? Amdis listened. Hear what? Exactly. Silence. Perfect silence. Not the peaceful silence of the countryside. The unsettling absence of life. No insects buzzed around the trees. No squirrels darted through the branches. Nothing. It's strange, Amdis admitted. I've never heard a forest this quiet. At the end of the drive, Villa Noctis finally revealed itself. Neither spoke. The photographs had not prepared them. The villa rose from the mountain like a forgotten cathedral. 4 stories of black stone. Twin towers overlooked the valley. Massive balconies curved around the upper floors. Marble staircases descended toward gardens, now reclaimed by ivy and roses. Weather-blackened gargoyles stared across the estate. Broken fountains waited in silent courtyards. Even abandoned, the villa possessed dignity. It refused to become a ruin. Rose whispered, My God. Amdis could only nod. It feels... She searched for the words. Alive. Hours passed unloading the truck. Boxes filled the grand entrance hall. Camping chairs stood beside unopened furniture. The electricity worked in only 3 rooms. Running water sputtered through ancient pipes before finally flowing clear. The villa smelled, not rotten, not moldy, only old. Dust coated every surface. Yet beneath the dust, everything remained astonishingly preserved. Rose walked into the kitchen. Look at this. Amdis joined her. Copper pots still hung above the fireplace. Hand-carved cabinets showed barely any warping. The marble counters gleamed beneath years of dust. It's incredible. It shouldn't look this good. He opened every cabinet. Nothing. No droppings, no nests, no insects. no smell of decay. Even beneath the sinks, nothing. Rose frowned. That's impossible. What? Old houses always have something. Mice, spiders, roaches. She opened another cabinet. Nothing. Even the corners were empty. The silence became heavier. By evening, they had explored only part of the first floor. The ballroom, library, dining hall, kitchen, music room. More bedrooms than they could count. Every room felt paused, as though the people who lived there had stepped outside for a walk and never returned. Rose stopped before a portrait hanging above the grand staircase. A beautiful woman dressed in black velvet looked down upon the hall. Her expression carried quiet sadness. There must be hundreds of paintings. Amdis nodded. I wonder who they all were. He looked at the woman's face. For a brief moment, he thought she smiled. He blinked. Dust floated through the fading sunlight. The expression was unchanged. You all right? Rose asked. I thought. He shook his head. Never mind. Night arrived quickly. Rain began tapping against the enormous stained glass windows. Their camping stove sat in the middle of the ballroom. Dinner consisted of canned soup, bread, cheese, and cheap Italian wine. Rose raised her paper cup. To terrible financial decisions. Amdis laughed. To adventures. They clinked their cups together. This place is going to be beautiful. It already is. She smiled. You know. What? I've never seen you this relaxed. He looked around the ballroom. The fireplace, the towering windows, the enormous chandelier hanging overhead. I don't understand it. Understand what? I should be overwhelmed. He looked around again. But I feel. He hesitated. Safe. Rose smiled warmly. I know. I feel it too. She reached across the table and took his hand. For the first time, she whispered, it feels like we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Later, the rain intensified. Rose fell asleep almost immediately inside their temporary bedroom. Amdis couldn't. The villa made strange noises. Wood settling, stone expanding in the cool air. Old pipes sighing, nothing unusual, nothing frightening. Still, sleep refused to come. Near midnight, he wandered downstairs carrying a flashlight. Moonlight spilled through stained glass, painting the marble floor in crimson and sapphire. He entered the ballroom. His light settled on the grand piano resting beneath a white sheet. Something drew him toward it. He couldn't explain why. Slowly, he pulled the sheet away. The ebony finish beneath remained almost perfect. He brushed dust from the polished wood. His fingers rested gently on a single key. He never pressed it. Yet, he heard music, not through his ears, inside his mind. Violins, cellos, a full orchestra, laughter, hundreds of voices. Elegant gowns turning beneath candlelight, crystal glasses, the scent of roses. He saw men bowing, women dancing, candles reflected in polished marble. For one impossible heartbeat, the ballroom lived again. Then, everything vanished. Silence. The dusty room stood empty once more. Amdis staggered backward, his breathing quickened. What? He looked around. No one. Nothing. He placed one hand against the piano. Without realizing it, he whispered, I'm home. The words escaped before he could think. A tear rolled down his cheek. He had no idea why. Far below the villa, beneath foundations older than recorded history, in darkness untouched by sunlight for centuries, a single ancient eye opened, then another. A whisper drifted through the black. So, long silence followed. He has returned. The darkness answered with the faint sound of many hearts, beginning to beat once more. Chapter 3. The Welcome Gift. Morning arrived wrapped in silver mist. The mountain disappeared beneath drifting clouds, leaving Villa Noctis floating like an island above the world. Amdis woke to the smell of fresh coffee. He smiled. Rose stood at the small camping stove, humming softly while sunlight spilled across her face. For a brief moment, everything felt ordinary. She turned. There you are. You made coffee. I figured we'd need it. He walked over and kissed her forehead. Best decision we've made since buying this place. She laughed. I thought buying me was your best decision. I didn't buy you. You bought me dinner. Oh, he nodded. You're right. You've been financially manipulating me ever since. She pushed him playfully. You are ridiculous. And yet, I still married you. They both laughed. It echoed through the enormous kitchen. For just a few minutes, Villa Noctis felt less like an abandoned fortress and more like a home. After breakfast, they began cleaning. Years of dust rose into the morning light. Room after room slowly came alive beneath their hands. Rose dusted bookshelves. Amdis polished marble fireplaces. Broken chairs were stacked for repair. Old rugs were rolled away. Yet something continued bothering them. The dust disappeared. Everything else remained. No cobwebs, no insect nests, no mouse droppings, no dead birds inside broken chimneys. Nothing. By noon, Rose finally stopped cleaning. This isn't normal. Amdis looked up from scrubbing a staircase. What now? She pointed toward the ceiling. Look. He followed her finger. Nothing. Exactly. What am I looking for? Spider webs. He frowned. She continued. This house has been abandoned for decades. Probably longer. There should be thousands of spiders. There aren't. She slowly looked around the enormous entrance hall. There isn't a single one. The realization settled heavily between them. After lunch, they drove back into San Lucian for supplies. The hardware store occupied one corner of the village square. An elderly man stood behind the counter arranging nails into small wooden bins. He smiled politely. You are from the villa? It wasn't a question. Amdis nodded. We're fixing it up. The old man's smile disappeared. You intend to stay? That's the plan. He quietly wrapped their purchases. You will need lantern oil. We have electricity. For now. Rose exchanged a glance with Amdis. The old man leaned closer. Listen carefully. His voice had dropped almost to a whisper. If you hear music after midnight, leave the room. Amdis blinked. What? The old man straightened immediately. I said nothing. Before either could ask another question, the church bell rang. Every conversation inside the store stopped. Several customers looked toward the hill. Then, just as suddenly, everyone resumed shopping, as though nothing had happened. Outside, a little girl stood feeding pigeons. She couldn't have been older than 7. When she saw Rose, she smiled. You live with the beautiful people. Rose knelt beside her. What beautiful people? The ones who only come out at night. The girl's grandmother rushed forward. Sophia! She pulled the child away. I'm sorry. It's all right. The older woman looked frightened. Sophia has an imagination. The child shook her head. No. They waved to me. The grandmother covered her mouth gently. We must go. As they hurried away, the little girl looked back toward Rose. They've been waiting. Driving home. Rose remained unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke. Did you notice something? What? Nobody asked what we're repairing. No. They asked if we're staying. Amdis nodded slowly. I noticed. The afternoon passed peacefully. By sunset, they had cleaned nearly the entire first floor. Rose stood in the grand entrance hall, smiling proudly. We're making progress. We are. She leaned against him. You know, what? I think this place chose us. He smiled. You've been reading too many Gothic novels. She laughed. Maybe. But it feels... She looked toward the sweeping staircase. Happy. That night, they prepared a simple dinner. Candles flickered across the long dining table. Only 2 people sat where once dozens had gathered. Rose raised her glass. To our first real night. Amdis smiled. To home. As they ate, something changed. A faint melody drifted through the villa, almost too soft to hear. Rose froze. You hear that? He nodded. Piano. Neither moved. The music lasted only a few seconds, then stopped. Complete silence returned. Amdis stood. "I'll check." Rose reached for his arm. "Don't." He smiled gently. "It's probably an old pipe." "Pipes don't play Mozart." He kissed her forehead. "I'll be right back." The ballroom stood empty. Moonlight streamed across polished marble. The piano remained exactly where he had left it. Closed, silent. He slowly approached. Nothing. He lifted the lid. The strings were coated in dust. No footprints, no signs anyone had touched it. He was about to leave when he noticed something resting on the piano bench. A single red rose, freshly cut, covered with morning dew, though it was nearly midnight. His pulse quickened. He looked around. "Who's there?" Only silence answered. He picked up the flower. Its fragrance filled the room. As he turned to leave, he caught movement in the great mirror above the fireplace. A tall figure dressed in black stood behind him, perfectly still. Amdis spun around. The room was empty. He looked back into the mirror. Nothing, only himself, holding the rose. He hurried upstairs. Rose met him at the bedroom door. "You were gone too long." He held up the flower. Her eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" "It was waiting for us." She slowly took the rose. "It's beautiful." Neither of them noticed. High above the ballroom, a hidden balcony disappearing into darkness. There, an unseen observer watched them. A calm voice echoed softly through the shadows. "They still love as they once did." Another voice answered. "Will he remember?" "Not yet." "And the woman?" A long silence followed. "She has a kind heart." "That will make what is coming far more difficult." Deep beneath Villa Noctis, the ancient darkness stirred once more. The house had offered its first welcome. The family would soon do the same. Chapter 4. The First Rule. The rose was still fresh the next morning. Not a single petal had wilted. Rose turned it slowly between her fingers as sunlight poured through the bedroom windows. "I should throw it away." Amdis looked up from unpacking a box. "Why?" "It bothers me." "Because someone left it?" She nodded. "No one should have been inside this house." He walked over. The flower smelled as though it had been cut only moments before. There was no dirt on the stem, no thorns. Someone had carefully removed everyone. "It doesn't make any sense," he admitted. Rose sighed. "Nothing about this place does." She set the rose inside an old crystal vase she had found in one of the cabinets. "If someone wants to scare us, they're doing a terrible job." Amdis smiled. "They brought flowers." She laughed. "Exactly." By late morning, they needed more building supplies. The truck rumbled back down the mountain toward St. Lucien. This time, people didn't simply stare. They watched. An elderly man removed his hat as they passed. A woman hurried her children inside. A delivery truck pulled to the side of the road until they drove by. Rose noticed. "They know." "They know something." Amdis nodded. "I think you're right." The hardware store owner greeted them with the same quiet expression. "You slept there." It wasn't a question. "We did." "You are unharmed." Again, not a question. "We're fine." The old man nodded slowly. "I am pleased." Rose stepped closer. "Please." "We're not children." "If everyone knows something, tell us." The old man looked toward the front windows. Two customers immediately pretended not to listen. After a long silence, he spoke. "There are rules." "What rules?" "The village keeps them." "Why?" "So the village still exists." Amdis frowned. "What does that mean?" The old man ignored the question. Instead, he opened an old wooden drawer beneath the counter. Inside rested a faded leather journal. Its pages had yellowed with age. He turned to one page. Written in elegant Italian script were dozens of names. Each name had a date beside it. Some stretched back more than 300 years. Amdis pointed. "What is this?" "The keepers." "The keepers of what?" "The covenant." Rose looked confused. "The covenant with who?" The old man closed the book. I have already said too much. He slid the journal back into the drawer. We don't understand. I know. When will we? His tired eyes met theirs. When the house decides. As they loaded lumber into the truck, the parish priest approached them. He wore black robes faded by years beneath the Italian sun. His face carried kindness and exhaustion. You are the new owners. Amdis smiled politely. We are. I am Father Lorenzo. They shook hands. I wish to welcome you. Rose smiled. Thank you. The priest hesitated, then quietly handed Amdis an old iron key. What is this? It belonged to my grandfather. And before him, my great-grandfather. Amdis turned it over in his hand. Heavy, beautifully crafted, covered in strange engravings. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. Father Lorenzo slowly shook his head. No. I have waited many years to give you that. Rose looked surprised. You knew we were coming? The priest smiled sadly. No. But I knew someone would. What does it unlock? I do not know. You've never tried? His smile disappeared. It does not belong to me. He looked toward Villa Noctis towering above the village. It never did. That evening, they returned to the villa. As the truck disappeared through the gates, Father Lorenzo remained standing beside the road. An elderly woman joined him. You gave him the key? Yes. Then it has begun. He nodded. The covenant has entered a new chapter. She looked worried. Do you think they are ready? No. Will the house care? He looked toward the distant towers. The house has waited too long. Back inside Villa Noctis, Rose began organizing the library. Thousands of books lined towering shelves, some written in Italian, others in French, German, Latin, languages neither of them recognized. Amdis wandered slowly between the shelves. His fingers drifted across worn leather bindings. Without thinking, he stopped before one particular shelf. There. Rose looked up. What? I don't know. He pulled a single book free. Dust exploded into the air. Unlike every other volume, this one carried no title. Only a silver crest burned into black leather. A crowned wolf, standing beneath a crescent moon. The moment his fingers touched the cover, a cold wind rushed through the library. Every candle went out. The heavy doors slammed shut. Rose jumped. Amdis! I'm here! He tried the doors. Locked. They weren't locked. I know. The temperature dropped sharply. Their breath became visible. Then, very softly, they heard footsteps. Not hurried, not threatening, measured, elegant. Someone was walking through the hallway outside the library. One pair of footsteps, then another, then another. Rose whispered, There are people outside. Amdis pressed his ear against the door. Silence. He opened it. The hallway stretched empty in both directions. No one. He looked down. Dust covered the marble floor exactly as before. There were no footprints. None. Someone had walked there, without touching the dust. That night, they lay awake. Neither admitted they were frightened. Rose reached across the bed and found Amdis's hand beneath the blanket. He squeezed it gently. We're all right. You don't know that. No, but we'll face it together. She smiled in the darkness. Promise? I promise. She rested her head against his shoulder. Outside, the wind whispered through ancient stone. Far below, hidden beneath the mountain, a vast chamber glowed with hundreds of candles. Ancient men and women dressed in black stood silently around an enormous circular table carved from obsidian. None spoke. At the head of the table sat a throne unlike the others, empty. One elder finally broke the silence. He has crossed the threshold. Another nodded. The villa has accepted him. A third looked toward the empty throne. What are your orders? The oldest among them slowly rose. His silver eyes reflected the candlelight. We obey the first rule. He looked toward the ceiling, toward the world above. No one reveals the truth. Not until... He smiled faintly. The blood remembers itself. The chamber fell silent once more, and above them, Amdis Athalaric slept peacefully, completely unaware that an ancient family had already begun waiting for its forgotten heir. Chapter 5. The Door That Should Not Open. The storm arrived just before dawn. Thunder rolled across the mountains like distant cannon fire, rattling the stained glass windows of Villa Noctis. Amdis stood on the eastern balcony with a mug of coffee in his hands. Below him, the valley had disappeared beneath a sea of fog. Only the church bell tower of San Lucian rose above the white blanket. Rose stepped onto the balcony wearing one of his oversized shirts. She slipped her arms around his waist. "I knew I'd find you here." He smiled. "I couldn't sleep." She rested her cheek against his back. "I had the strangest dream." "What happened?" "I was walking through this house." He turned to face her. "You've already done that." She shook her head. "No, it wasn't empty." She hesitated. There were hundreds of people. They were dressed like they belonged in another century. Candles everywhere. Music. She looked toward the ballroom windows. "They all stopped dancing when I walked in." "What did they do?" "They bowed." Amdis laughed softly. "You've definitely been spending too much time in this house." Rose didn't laugh. "They weren't bowing to me." Silence. "They were bowing to you." The rain continued all morning. Unable to work outside, they explored the upper floors. The villa seemed endless. Guest rooms, private parlors, reading rooms, music salons, a chapel with faded frescoes, a conservatory overtaken by ivy. Every hallway revealed another mystery. Every staircase seemed to lead somewhere unexpected. Rose unfolded an old blueprint they had found among the purchase documents. "This doesn't make sense." "What?" She compared the drawing to the hallway. "There should be another room." Amdis studied it. "You're right. According to the plans, there was a large chamber between the library and the western tower. Yet, no doorway existed. Only an uninterrupted stone wall." He tapped the masonry. "Solid." Rose folded her arms. "So where's the room?" For nearly an hour they searched. They measured walls, counted windows from outside, compared dimensions. The room undeniably existed, but there was no entrance. Finally, Amdis leaned against the wall in frustration. The moment his palm touched the stone, something happened. A deep metallic click echoed behind the wall. Both froze. Rose whispered, "Did you hear that?" Before either could move, the entire section of stone began sliding silently into the floor. Dust drifted through the air. Behind it, a narrow passage stretched into darkness. Neither spoke. Rose looked at Amdis. "You didn't." "I know. I barely touched it." The passage smelled of cedar, old parchment, and roses. Not decay, not death. Someone or something had cared for this place. Amdis switched on his flashlight. Its beam reached only a short distance into the darkness. "Maybe we should wait." Rose nodded. "And call who?" He smiled. "The ghost police." She managed a nervous laugh. "Okay, we go together." They stepped inside. The hidden passage ended after only 20 feet. Beyond it, they entered an extraordinary room. Neither could breathe. It was unlike anything else in the villa. Perfectly preserved. A roaring fireplace burned. Fresh candles illuminated carved oak walls. Books rested neatly on polished shelves. A crystal decanter held red wine. Fresh flowers stood beneath an open window. Everything looked lived in, as though its owner had simply stepped out for a moment. Rose whispered, "Someone's here." Amdis slowly nodded. Then he noticed the portrait above the fireplace. It depicted a tall, black nobleman dressed in dark velvet embroidered with silver thread. His posture radiated quiet authority. His eyes were unmistakably familiar. Rose looked back and forth between the portrait and Amdis. "Amdis!" "I know. It looks like you." "No." He stepped closer. "It looks related." The painting bore no name, only an inscription carved into the frame in Latin. Neither of them could read it. As Amdis reached toward the portrait, The fireplace flared brightly. A cold gust swept through the room. One book slid from the shelf by itself. It landed at his feet. He slowly picked it up. Unlike the others, this one was written entirely in English. Its title read, The House of Noctis. Rose smiled nervously. That's convenient. He opened it. Every page was blank until a single drop of blood landed on the paper. He looked down. A tiny splinter from the hidden door had cut his thumb. One crimson drop soaked into the page. Words began appearing, line after line, written in elegant black ink. Neither of them moved. Rose whispered, "That's impossible." The writing continued until only one sentence remained. "Welcome home." The ink paused. Then, as if an unseen hand hesitated, another line slowly formed. Amdis. His heartbeat stopped. Rose looked at him. "How does it know your name?" "I don't know. It shouldn't." He swallowed hard. "I've never told anyone in this country." The final line appeared, slower than the others, as though every letter required effort. "The house has remembered." Suddenly, the fireplace went dark. Every candle extinguished at once. The hidden room fell into complete darkness. Then, from somewhere deep inside the villa, a bell rang once. Far below the mountain, the ancient council rose to its feet. The oldest elder closed his eyes. "The first seal has opened." Another asked quietly, "Should we wake the Lord Regent?" The elder's expression hardened. "No, not yet. He would kill the boy before the blood has awakened." "And the woman?" A long silence filled the chamber. "The house has accepted her." That has not happened for over 300 years. Above them, Amdis and Rose stood motionless in the darkness. Neither realized that by opening a single hidden door, they had just taken the first irreversible step into a war that had been waiting centuries to begin. Chapter 6 was the guest below. The hidden room remained dark for several long moments. Amdis and Rose stood perfectly still. Neither dared move. Then, as suddenly as the candles had gone out, the fireplace burst back to life. One by one, the candles relit themselves. Not all at once, slowly, deliberately. As if invisible hands were walking through the room, lighting each flame in turn. Rose instinctively stepped closer to Amdis. "I think," she swallowed, "I think someone is here." He didn't answer. "Because," he agreed. The book lay open on the desk. The words had disappeared. Every page was blank once again. Amdis turned page after page. Nothing. Rose touched the paper. "Did we imagine it?" He looked at his thumb. The tiny cut remained. A single crimson stain marked the corner of the first page. "No, we didn't imagine it." He carefully closed the book. "I think we should leave." For the first time since arriving at Villa Noctis, Rose nodded immediately. "I was hoping you'd say that." As they walked toward the hidden passage, Amdis stopped. On the desk rested an envelope. It hadn't been there moments earlier. Cream-colored, sealed with black wax. The wax carried the same crest they had seen on the untitled book, the crowned wolf beneath the crescent moon. Rose whispered, "Don't touch it." He hesitated, then slowly picked it up. The wax seal broke with almost no pressure. Inside, only a single sheet of parchment, written in flawless English, "To the master of the house." Both stared. Amdis continued reading. "Forgive our absence. Your arrival was unexpected. The family requests 3 nights to prepare itself before formally presenting its respects. Until then, you and your wife are honored guests of Villa Noctis. Everything within these walls belongs to you. No signature, only the black crest." Rose looked at him. "This isn't funny." "I know. If someone is doing this, they're inside the house." Amdis folded the letter carefully. "But how?" That evening, they drove back into San Lucian, not because they needed supplies, because they needed answers. Father Lorenzo was sweeping the church steps when he saw them. His expression told them he already knew why they had come. "You found something." Amdis handed him the letter. The old priest read only the first line. His hands began trembling. He immediately folded it shut. Where did you get this? In the villa. When? This afternoon. The priest closed his eyes. So soon? Rose stepped forward. Father, please. We need answers. Instead, he asked a question. Did the house welcome you? Neither answered. The silence was enough. He nodded sadly. I feared it would. What is Villa Noctis? He looked toward the mountain. It is older than this village. Older than this church. Older than many kingdoms. Who lives there? Another long silence. Finally, he answered with complete honesty, I have never seen them. But my grandfather did, and his grandfather before him. Rose frowned. So they're real? The priest met her eyes. I do not know what they are. But I know this. They have always kept their word. Amdis unfolded the letter again. What does this mean? He pointed to one sentence. You and your wife are honored guests. Father Lorenzo smiled sadly. That is the part that frightens me. Why? Because. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. They have never called anyone master of the house. Before they could ask another question, the church bell rang 6 times. The priest immediately stood. You must leave. What? Now. Why? The sun. Rose looked confused. It hasn't even set. It will. And I do not wish to be on the mountain after dark. You've never been inside? The priest slowly shook his head. My family has served the covenant for 11 generations. We keep the agreement. They keep theirs. No one crosses those boundaries. As they drove back toward Villa Noctis, they noticed something unusual. The village gates, heavy wooden gates that stood open all day, were being closed. One by one, shopkeepers locked their doors. Parents called children inside. Windows were shuttered. Candles were extinguished. The entire village was preparing, not for a storm, but for night itself. Rose watched through the side mirror. They're hiding. Amdis nodded. From what? Neither answered. The truck climbed the final road. Halfway to the villa, they saw someone standing beside the stone wall. An elderly man, perfectly dressed, black suit, silver cane, white gloves. He appeared to be in his late 70s, yet he stood with the posture of a soldier. As Amdis slowed the truck, the gentleman removed his hat. He bowed, not casually, deeply, with perfect form. When he spoke, his English carried the polished elegance of another century. Good evening. He smiled warmly. Lord Amdis. Amdis stared. I think you've mistaken me. The gentleman smiled again. No, I assure you, I never make that mistake. Rose leaned toward the open window. Who are you? He turned to her. His eyes softened. You must be Lady Rose. Her heart skipped. How do you know my name? He bowed once more. The house knows. The family knows. And now, he looked back at Amdis. The valley knows. He stepped aside. The road ahead was clear. I have been instructed to escort you home. Amdis's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I'm not following a stranger into my own house. The old gentleman chuckled. An excellent answer. Your ancestors would have approved. He opened the passenger side door of the truck, not waiting for permission, not forcing it, simply opening it. Then he climbed inside. Rose looked at Amdis in disbelief. The gentleman settled comfortably into the seat. My name, he smiled politely, is Sebastian. I have served the house of Noctis for 243 years. Silence, and then he added with perfect courtesy, and I regret to inform you that everything you believe about the world is about to change. Far beneath Villa Noctis, in the ancient council chamber, one elder looked toward the empty throne. The butler has revealed himself. The oldest vampire nodded. Then the waiting is over. The family. He looked upward. Yoku shall receive its master. Chapter 7. The Butler's Secret. Neither Amdis nor Rose spoke for nearly a minute. The truck continued climbing the winding road toward Villa Noctis, while Sebastian sat calmly between them, his gloved hands resting upon the silver handle of his cane. Finally, Amdis broke the silence. "You expect us to believe you're over 200 years old?" Sebastian smiled. "No, I expect you to believe your own eyes." Rose folded her arms. "Who are you really?" "I have already answered." "You haven't. I am Sebastian, butler to the house of Noctis, for 243 years. Amdis laughed nervously. "That's impossible." Sebastian looked out the window. "So I have been told." The truck reached the front courtyard. As soon as the engine stopped, Sebastian stepped out. His movements were graceful, almost unnaturally precise. He walked to the enormous front doors. Without touching them, they slowly opened inward. Rose stopped walking. "Amdis, I saw it. There wasn't anyone there." "I know." Sebastian turned toward them. "The house has been waiting. You needn't carry your luggage. It has already been arranged." Rose frowned. "By who?" "The staff." "What staff?" Sebastian's smile never changed. "You shall meet them." Inside, the entrance hall was different. Neither of them could explain how. The marble floor gleamed. Dust had vanished from the grand staircase. Fresh candles burned in silver holders. The scent of roses drifted through the air. Everything looked occupied. Rose whispered, "We cleaned some of this, but not all of it." Amdis slowly nodded. "It wasn't like this," Sebastian answered quietly. "The house wished to welcome you properly." He led them into the ballroom. The grand piano stood uncovered. The fireplace burned brightly. A long dining table had been prepared. Crystal, silver, fine china. Enough places for 20 guests. Only 3 settings had been arranged. One at each end, one in the center. Rose looked around. "Who's coming?" Sebastian bowed slightly. "Only those permitted." Before anyone could speak, the great doors opened. 3 figures entered. An elderly woman dressed in black, a young man no older than 25, a little girl with long dark hair. All 3 stopped several feet away. Then, without a word, they bowed, not to Sebastian, to Amdis. He immediately stepped backward. "No, you don't have to do that." The elderly woman slowly raised her head. Her pale gray eyes studied him. There were tears in them. "My lord," her voice trembled. "We feared your blood had been lost forever." Amdis looked at Rose, then back to the strangers. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The young man answered, "We prayed you would say that." Confusion filled the room. Rose stepped beside her husband. "What does that mean?" The old woman smiled sadly. "It means you have not yet remembered." Dinner was unlike anything either of them expected. The 3 mysterious guests ate ordinary food. Bread, roasted vegetables, cheese, wine. No one reached for blood. No fangs appeared. No monstrous transformations. If not for their impossible knowledge, they seemed entirely human. Conversation remained careful, respectful, measured. No one answered direct questions. Every reply created another mystery. Finally, Amdis set down his fork. "I need one honest answer." The elderly woman nodded. "If I am permitted, are vampires real?" Silence, then, without the slightest hesitation. Sebastian replied, "Yes." The word echoed through the ballroom. Rose stared at him. Amdis laughed once. Not because it was funny, because his mind refused to accept it. "That's impossible." "So was I," Sebastian said gently, "until I died." The room became very quiet. Rose slowly stood. "No, this has to be some kind of joke. You expect us to believe." Sebastian removed one white glove. Without warning, he picked up a silver carving knife from the table. He placed his hand flat upon the oak surface, then drove the blade completely through his own palm. Rose screamed. Amdis leapt to his feet. Blood flowed across the polished wood. Sebastian never flinched. He simply looked at them calmly. Then, Very slowly, he withdrew the knife. The wound began closing before their eyes. Skin knit together, muscle reformed. Bone disappeared beneath flawless flesh. Within seconds, nothing remained, not even a scar. Rose backed away until she struck the wall. No! No! Amdis could only stare. His voice barely escaped. That's... Sebastian replaced his glove. Impossible. No. He looked directly into Amdis's eyes. It is merely the world, as it truly is. Before anyone could recover, Amdis instinctively gripped the edge of the table. A splinter pierced his finger. A single drop of blood fell onto the polished oak. Every vampire in the room froze. The elderly woman's eyes widened. The young man stopped breathing. Even Sebastian slowly turned. The scent reached them. One drop, one heartbeat, one forgotten fragrance. The old woman whispered, Athalaric. Then, for the first time in over 300 years, every candle in the ballroom extinguished at once. Something beneath Villa Noctis had awakened. Chapter 8, Blood Calls to Blood. Darkness swallowed the ballroom. Rose reached instinctively for Amdis. His hand found hers. He squeezed it tightly. I'm here. Somewhere in the darkness, someone whispered. My lord! Another voice answered sharply. Silence! Then, every candle reignited. Not one flame flickered. It was as though the darkness had never existed. Yet everyone in the room had changed. The elderly woman stood with tears running freely down her face. The young man stared at Amdis with open disbelief. Even Sebastian, whose composure had never broken, looked shaken. Only for a moment. Then the perfect butler returned. He straightened his coat. The family requests your forgiveness. Amdis frowned. For what? The elderly woman lowered her head. For doubting. Doubting what? She looked at the crimson drop still resting upon the polished table. You! Rose stepped forward. No. We're done speaking in riddles. Her voice echoed through the ballroom. You tell us vampires are real. You somehow know my husband's name. You call him Lord. You speak about blood. And every time we ask a question, you answer with another mystery. She looked directly at Sebastian. No more. The old butler nodded respectfully. A fair request. He folded his hands. There are truths I may tell, and truths I cannot. Not yet. Rose narrowed her eyes. Who decides? Sebastian answered without hesitation. The master of the house. She pointed toward Amdis. That's him according to you. Sebastian remained silent. Amdis noticed. You didn't answer. Sebastian smiled politely. No, I did not. The elderly woman slowly approached. She stopped several feet away. My name is Lady Isabella. She bowed gracefully. I have lived in Villa Noctis for 411 years. Rose closed her eyes. I don't think I'll ever get used to hearing numbers like that. A faint smile crossed Isabella's face. Neither did we. She looked toward Amdis. When you entered this house, something changed. What changed? The villa woke. Amdis looked around the magnificent ballroom. Woke? She nodded. For centuries. The house has slept. The fireplaces burned. The halls remain clean. The gardens survived. But it was waiting. For who? She met his eyes. For its master. No. Amdis shook his head. I bought this house 6 weeks ago. I've lived in Georgia my entire life. My parents were Americans. My grandparents were Americans. I don't know anything about this place. Lady Isabella's expression softened. We know. Then stop acting like I belong here. Silence settled over the room. Finally, Sebastian spoke. You believe you purchased Villa Noctis? Amdis nodded. I did. The butler smiled gently. My lord, I believe Villa Noctis purchased you. Rose actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it sounded impossible. This house bought us? No. Sebastian corrected. It called you. Amdis rubbed his forehead. This is insane. I agree. Rose looked at him. You agree? I agree it's insane. He sighed. But he looked around the ballroom. I also watched a knife go through a man's hand. No. He looked at Sebastian. Whatever's happening, it's real. Sebastian walked toward the grand piano. He rested one gloved hand upon the polished wood. My lord, there is one thing you deserve to know. He slowly lifted the lid. The house recognizes blood. Not names, not titles. Blood. He pressed a single key. A beautiful note filled the ballroom. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire piano was playing by itself. Rose stared in disbelief. No one's touching it. Amdis couldn't move. The melody, he knew it. Not because he had heard it before, because somehow he remembered it. His lips began whispering the words before he realized he was speaking. An ancient language, soft, beautiful, completely unfamiliar. The vampires froze. Lady Isabella's hand rose to her mouth. The young man slowly stepped backward. Sebastian lowered his head. He remembers the first hymn. The music stopped instantly. Amdis blinked. What? What did I just say? No one answered. Rose looked at him. You don't know? He slowly shook his head. I've never heard those words before, but I knew them. Suddenly, a violent crash echoed through the villa. Not upstairs and not outside. Below them, deep beneath the mountain, the chandeliers trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ballroom doors burst open. Another vampire rushed inside. Unlike the others, his clothes were torn. His face carried fresh wounds. Blood covered one sleeve. He immediately dropped to one knee. My lady, my lord. He struggled to catch his breath. They've crossed the eastern border. Every vampire in the room became perfectly still. Lady Isabella whispered. So soon, the messenger continued. House Varkalak has broken the peace. They have entered Italian territory. Sebastian's expression darkened for the first time. How many? 40 confirmed? Perhaps more. Rose looked between them. What's House Varkalak? No one answered immediately. Finally, Sebastian looked directly at Amdis. The beginning of the war. Far away, hidden beneath another mountain. An enormous throne room echoed with screams. A headless body collapsed across polished stone. Its blood flowed toward the feet of a towering vampire dressed in black armor. He rose slowly from his throne. His crimson eyes burned like dying embers. A messenger knelt before him. My lord, the house of Noctis has awakened. The ancient ruler smiled, a terrible smile. So, the forgotten blood still lives. He picked up the severed head by its hair. And the heir? The messenger lowered his eyes. He has returned. The ruler crushed the skull in one hand, then quietly whispered, Prepare the armies. This time, we erase the athalaric bloodline forever. Hundreds of armored vampires throughout the chamber struck the stone floor with their weapons. The sound echoed through the mountain like thunder. The ancient war had begun once again. Chapter 9, the Lord of Villa Noctis. No one spoke. The messenger remained on one knee. Blood dripped steadily from the deep wounds across his chest. The silence inside the ballroom became almost unbearable. Finally, Amdis broke it. I think, he looked around the room, someone needs to tell me exactly what's happening. Lady Isabella looked toward Sebastian. The old butler gave the smallest nod. You may answer. She inhaled slowly. There are 8 great houses. Were. She corrected herself. Now, there are only 4. Rose looked confused. 4 what? 4 noble vampire families. The oldest bloodlines. The rulers? And Villa Noctis? Lady Isabella's eyes softened. It was the first. The room fell silent again. Amdis shook his head. You're telling me this house ruled vampires? Lady Isabella answered carefully. Once. And now, Sebastian stepped forward. Now, the house sleeps, the family survives. But it no longer rules. Why? Another silence. A longer one. Finally, Sebastian answered. Because history was rewritten. Amdis frowned. What does that mean? It means, Sebastian looked into the fire. Those who win wars decide what future generations remember. And what they forget. Rose crossed her arms. So someone erased this family. Sebastian nodded. Yes, they burned books. They destroyed portraits. They executed entire bloodlines. They changed names. They erased marriages. They erased children. They erased heirs. Amdis looked toward the portrait in the hidden room. So no one remembers who built this place. The old butler smiled. Exactly. The wounded messenger slowly stood. My lord. Amdis immediately interrupted him. Please, stop calling me that. The messenger hesitated. I cannot. Why? Because, he swallowed, the house already has. Rose stepped beside Amdis. I don't understand. Lady Isabella smiled gently. Neither do we. You keep saying that. Because it is true. She pointed toward the ceiling. We did not choose you. The villa did. Amdis laughed softly. I'm arguing with people who believe a building can make decisions. Sebastian answered calmly. Not believe. No. The old butler slowly walked toward the massive fireplace. Above it hung the largest portrait in the ballroom. Unlike every other painting, its face had been slashed away. Only the body remained. The canvas had been deliberately destroyed. Rose stared. Who did that? No one knows. Sebastian touched the damaged frame. The face was removed almost 300 years ago. Why? So no one would remember him. Amdis studied the ruined painting. Something about it disturbed him. Not because it was damaged, because he felt sadness, a deep sadness, as though he had lost someone he had once loved. He stepped closer. Without thinking, he placed his hand upon the frame. The entire ballroom shook. A low rumble echoed through the villa. The fire exploded upward. Every vampire in the room immediately knelt. Not one remained standing. Rose stared in disbelief. Amdis! He looked around. What did I do? No one answered. Then, very slowly, the torn canvas began repairing itself. Threads rewove. Paint returned. Color spread across the missing face. Everyone watched in stunned silence. Within seconds, the portrait stood complete. A nobleman dressed in midnight black gazed proudly across the ballroom. His skin was dark. His eyes carried quiet strength. Silver threaded through his hair. One hand rested upon the hilt of an ancient sword. The resemblance was unmistakable. Not identical, but enough. Rose whispered, Oh, my God. Amdis stepped backward. No! No! Sebastian closed his eyes. The founder. Lady Isabella lowered her head. Lord Athalaric. The room remained frozen. Amdis looked from the portrait to his own reflection in the nearby mirror. Back again. This, he struggled to breathe, this doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. It has to be coincidence. No one argued. No one agreed. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the enormous front doors. 3 slow knocks. Everyone in the ballroom became motionless. The messenger's face lost all color. Lady Isabella whispered, They would not. Sebastian looked toward the entrance hall. They have. Another knock, stronger. The ancient oak doors trembled. Rose looked around. Who is it? No one answered. Amdis walked toward the hall. Sebastian immediately stepped in front of him. My lord, you must remain behind me. Amdis frowned. It's my house. Sebastian looked directly into his eyes. Exactly. The knocking came again. This time, a voice followed, deep, powerful, elegant. I know someone is home. Silence. Then the voice laughed softly. it would be considered poor manners to keep a guest waiting. Sebastian whispered, "They should not know." Lady Isabella answered, "They smell him." The butler slowly opened the doors. Standing outside and beneath the moonlight were 6 figures dressed entirely in black. Each carried themselves with unmistakable confidence. The man at their center smiled politely. His silver hair rested neatly behind his shoulders. His clothing was immaculate. His gloves were white. His boots shone. Everything about him suggested refinement, until one noticed his eyes, cold, ancient, predatory. He bowed with flawless grace. "Good evening. My name," he smiled at Amdis, "is Lord Cassian Draven. I have come to welcome our newest neighbor." His gaze shifted briefly toward Sebastian, then back to Amdis. "I do hope I am not interrupting a family reunion." Behind Cassian, his companions smiled. None of them blinked. Not once. Inside the villa, every member of House Noctis remained perfectly still. Amdis didn't understand why. Rose did. For the first time since arriving in Italy, she saw genuine fear on the faces of vampires. Chapter 10. Guest by Invitation. The grand doors remained open. Moonlight poured across the marble floor like silver water. No one moved. Lord Cassian Draven stood outside with perfect composure, his black overcoat stirring gently in the mountain breeze. Behind him, 5 companions waited in absolute silence, each dressed with the elegance of old European nobility, each unnaturally still, each watching Amdis. Not Sebastian, not Lady Isabella. Amdis. Rose felt the grip of her husband's hand tighten around hers. She whispered, "Whatever happens, don't let go." "I won't." Cassian smiled warmly. "My apologies. I should have brought wine." His eyes drifted across the entrance hall. "Although," he smiled again, "I suspect your cellar is considerably better than mine." No one laughed. Sebastian stepped forward. "You have crossed house boundaries without notice." Cassian inclined his head politely. "I requested permission." "No, you announced yourself." "A subtle distinction. It is still discourteous." Cassian sighed dramatically. "Sebastian, you've always been the strict one." The old butler remained expressionless. "And you've always confused charm with manners." For the first time, Cassian laughed. A genuine laugh. "I've missed you." Amdis finally spoke. "Do the two of you know each other?" Cassian looked pleasantly surprised. "Oh, you haven't told him." He looked back at Sebastian. "I suppose that's wise. A great many things should remain unsaid." He turned again toward Amdis. "We've known one another." He paused thoughtfully. "For almost 300 years." Rose quietly muttered, "I don't think I'll ever get used to hearing numbers like that." Cassian's eyes softened. "You must be Rose." She nodded cautiously. "I am. I've heard remarkable things about you." She frowned. "From who?" He smiled. "The house." Rose looked at Amdis. "I officially hate it when people say things like that." Cassian slowly climbed the front steps. Every vampire inside the villa stiffened. Sebastian raised one gloved hand. "No further." Cassian stopped immediately. One foot remained outside. One remained on the threshold. He looked down, then smiled knowingly. "So, the invitation has not been extended." Sebastian answered quietly. "No." Cassian nodded. "I suspected as much." He looked at Amdis. "You see, my lord, there are rules, ancient rules. I cannot enter your home unless you invite me." Amdis blinked. "So that's true?" Cassian chuckled. "You thought every vampire story was fiction." "I did. Some are, some aren't." Rose took a cautious step forward. "If you can't enter, why are you here?" Cassian's smile faded. "To see him." His eyes rested on Amdis. "For centuries, there have been rumors, stories, whispers, A forgotten branch, a forgotten child, a forgotten bloodline. He folded his hands behind his back. I came to discover whether those whispers were true. And Cassian's smile returned. They are. Amdis frowned. You don't even know me. I don't. But, Cassian inhaled deeply. I know your blood. The words struck the room like a hammer. Every member of House Noctis became silent once more. Rose looked directly at Cassian. What exactly are you? Cassian answered without hesitation. A vampire. No games, no riddles, no poetry. Just the truth. Rose nodded slowly. I appreciate that. He smiled. Most humans don't. Amdis crossed his arms. If you're really a vampire, what do you want from me? Cassian's expression became unexpectedly serious. Nothing. The answer surprised everyone. I came to warn you. Sebastian narrowed his eyes. Cassian continued. The moment your blood awakened this house, it awakened others. There are noble families who will want to recruit you. There are others who will want you dead. Rose's face grew pale. Dead? Cassian nodded. Very. He slowly reached inside his coat. Instantly, every vampire in the villa moved. Sebastian stepped forward. Lady Isabella's eyes flashed silver. The messenger crouched like a hunting wolf. Cassian stopped. He sighed. We really have become suspicious. He carefully withdrew, not a weapon, but an old parchment map. He held it where everyone could see. The old territories. He unfolded it upon the front steps. Ancient Europe spread across faded parchment. Different regions had been marked in black, crimson, silver, and gold. Cassian pointed. House Varkalak. His finger moved east. House Morvain. South. House Draven. Finally, his hand rested upon northern Italy. Only one territory had been left blank. No crest, no name, nothing. Amdis frowned. What's missing? Cassian looked directly into his eyes. House Noctis. Rose leaned closer. Why is it blank? Cassian smiled sadly. Because someone wanted the world to forget it ever existed. The mountain suddenly trembled, not violently, just enough for dust to fall from the stone arch above the entrance. Every vampire looked toward the earth beneath their feet. Cassian slowly rolled up the map. He knows. Sebastian's expression darkened. It is too early. Cassian nodded. I agree. Another tremor, stronger this time. Somewhere deep beneath Villa Noctis, something enormous struck stone. Once, then again. The sound echoed upward through the foundations. Rose grabbed Amdis's arm. What was that? No one answered immediately. Finally, Lady Isabella whispered, It cannot be. Cassian looked toward the depths of the villa. For the first time since his arrival, the smile vanished from his face. He looked at Sebastian. What have you kept imprisoned beneath this mountain? Sebastian's voice was calm. We kept nothing. Cassian slowly turned. What do you mean? The old butler looked toward Amdis, then quietly replied, We were never guarding a prisoner. A long silence followed. Then Sebastian spoke the words that made every vampire present forget to breathe. We have been guarding a throne. The mountain shook again. Far below, a single pair of ancient eyes opened in the darkness. Not with hunger, not with rage, but with recognition. As if something older than every vampire family alive had sensed that the rightful blood of Villa Noctis had finally come home. Chapter 11. The Lord Regent. The mountain became still. Silence settled over Villa Noctis once again. Not even the wind dared move through the cypress trees. Lord Cassian Draven remained standing on the threshold. His eyes never left Amdis. You felt it. Amdis nodded. I don't know what I felt, but he looked toward the stone floor. Something down there knows I'm here. No one answered, because no one wished to. Rose broke the silence. Enough! She stepped beside her husband. I've listened to all of you speak in half-truths for days. She looked first at Sebastian, then Lady Isabella, then Cassian. My husband deserves answers. If you respect him, then start acting like it. Sebastian bowed. You are correct, Lady Rose. Cassian smiled. I rather like her. Sebastian slowly turned toward Amdis. My lord, there is one truth I may now reveal. He folded his hands before him. The family you see here, he gestured toward Lady Isabella and the others, is not the family. Amdis frowned. What do you mean? We are merely those who remained. The servants, the scholars, the guardians, the musicians, the physicians, the craftsmen, the teachers, the children. Rose looked around the ballroom. Then where is everyone else? A shadow crossed Sebastian's face. They died. Or they fled. Cassian spoke quietly. And some changed sides. The words hung heavily in the room. Lady Isabella lowered her eyes. There was betrayal. Sebastian nodded once. There always is. Amdis looked from one face to another. So there was a war. There was. And you lost, Cassian answered. No. The war ended. No one truly won. The survivors simply rewrote history. Rose slowly sat down. This is insane. She laughed softly, a weary laugh. Last week, I was picking paint colors. She looked around the ancient ballroom. Now I'm apparently married to someone vampires keep bowing to. Amdis reached for her hand. She smiled. I'm not going anywhere. He squeezed her hand. I know. No matter what you are, you're still my husband. Those words echoed through the hall. Several vampires quietly looked at one another. Lady Isabella smiled through tears. It has been centuries since anyone spoke of love inside these walls. Cassian looked toward the fireplace. I almost envy you. Rose raised an eyebrow. A vampire envies us? He answered honestly. Immortality teaches many things. It does not teach how to grow old together. Silence followed. Even Sebastian lowered his eyes. A sudden knock echoed through the ballroom. Not from the front door, from beneath the floor. 3 heavy knocks. Slow, deliberate. Boom, boom, boom. Every vampire present immediately stood. Lady Isabella whispered, It has never done that before. Cassian's expression hardened. No, it hasn't. Sebastian walked toward the center of the ballroom. He knelt, then placed one gloved hand upon the marble floor. His eyes closed. He remained perfectly still, almost listening. Finally, he opened his eyes again. It is requesting. He looked toward Amdis. But an audience? Amdis blinked. With me? Yes. Rose immediately stepped forward. He's not going anywhere alone. Sebastian smiled warmly. I suspected you would say that. Cassian looked toward the hidden passage leading deeper into the villa. I should leave. Sebastian nodded. You should. Cassian bowed deeply to Amdis. My lord, I hope we meet again. I have a feeling, next time, we shall stand on the same side. He smiled politely toward Rose. My lady. Then he stepped backward across the threshold. The instant both feet left the property, he vanished. Not into mist, not into shadow. One heartbeat he was there. The next, the mountain road stood empty. Rose whispered, I'll never get used to that. The front doors closed by themselves. The bolts slid into place. Heavy locks turned with deep metallic clicks. One by one, and in every window shutter closed throughout Villa Noctis. The house was sealing itself. Sebastian looked at Amdis. It has begun. What has? The house has decided. Lady Isabella slowly approached carrying an ancient lantern. Its flame burned blue instead of gold. She handed it to Amdis. This light has guided every lord of Villa Noctis. He hesitated. I don't think I should take this. She smiled gently. It has already accepted you. The blue flame suddenly grew brighter. Not because of the lantern, because Amdis had touched it. Every vampire in the room lowered their heads. Sebastian whispered, "The house has spoken?" Rose slipped her hand into Amdis's. "Whatever's down there, we face it together." He looked at her, then smiled. Together. With the blue lantern lighting their way, Amdis and Rose followed Sebastian toward a spiral staircase hidden behind the grand fireplace. The stairs descended into darkness. Far below, something waited. Not a monster. Not yet. A truth. One that had remained buried beneath Villa Noctis for over 3 centuries. And for the first time since the night they purchased the forgotten villa, Amdis felt something stronger than fear. He felt that whatever awaited below had been waiting for him. Chapter 12. The Hall of Ancestors. The blue lantern cast long shadows across the spiral staircase. Stone steps worn smooth by centuries disappeared into the darkness below. Amdis descended first. Rose never released his hand. Sebastian followed a respectful distance behind. Lady Isabella carried a second lantern. No one spoke. The silence felt sacred, not empty, reverent, as though the mountain itself were listening. The air grew cooler. The scent of damp stone slowly gave way to something unexpected. Incense, old parchment, beeswax, fresh roses. Rose frowned. "This place doesn't smell abandoned," Sebastian answered softly. "It isn't." The staircase ended before 2 enormous bronze doors. Each stood nearly 20 feet high. They were unlike anything Amdis had ever seen. Intricate carvings covered every inch. Knights, wolves, angels, kings, queens, children. Families gathered around long tables. A castle stood proudly above them all. At the very center, the same crest appeared once more. The crowned wolf beneath the crescent moon. Beneath it, words carved into the bronze. This time, Amdis understood them. He didn't know how. He simply read them. Blood remembers what history forgets. He stopped walking. Rose looked at him. "What does it say?" He repeated the words aloud. Sebastian's eyes widened. "You can read it. I've never seen this language before." "No," Sebastian whispered. "But your blood has." The great doors slowly opened, not with a groan, not with the protest of rusted hinges. They opened as smoothly as though they had been used that very morning. Beyond them lay an immense hall. Rose forgot to breathe. Thousands of candles illuminated vaulted ceilings. Massive marble columns stretched into darkness. Along both walls stood statues, hundreds of them, men, women, children, each carved with astonishing detail, each dressed in clothing from different centuries. Some wore crowns, others carried swords. Some held books, others carried infants. Every face seemed alive. Amdis stepped inside. The blue lantern brightened. Every candle in the hall flared at once. The statues seemed almost to awaken. Rose whispered, "They're watching us." Lady Isabella smiled sadly. "They always have." Amdis walked slowly between the rows of marble figures. Each pedestal bore a name. Each belonged to House Noctis. He read them one by one. Lord Adrian Noctis, Lady Seraphine Noctis, Lord Matthias Noctis, Lady Helena Noctis, generation after generation, stretching back farther than he could comprehend. Then he stopped. One pedestal stood empty. No statue, only polished black marble. Upon it, a single inscription, reserved, nothing more. No name, no date. Rose looked puzzled. Why would they leave one unfinished? No one answered. At the far end of the hall stood another statue. Unlike the others, it was covered completely by a heavy black cloth. Even after all these centuries, no dust rested upon it. Amdis found himself walking toward it. Sebastian spoke quietly. "My lord, I would advise against that." Amdis stopped. "Why?" "There are some memories that awaken before their proper time. Rose looked at Sebastian. You've said that a lot. Not yet. Not the right time. When does the right time ever come? The old butler lowered his eyes. When the house no longer needs to protect him. Amdis turned away from the covered statue. His attention shifted to another object. An enormous leather-bound volume rested upon a marble pedestal. Its cover was reinforced with iron. A silver clasp held it shut. The words on its spine were written in the same ancient language. Again, he understood them. The Book of Blood. He reached toward it. Sebastian did not stop him. Rose noticed. You warned him about the statue, but not the book. Sebastian nodded. Because the book chooses. The clasp released itself. The heavy cover slowly opened. Thousands of pages, every one filled with names, births, deaths, marriages, centuries of history. The pages began turning by themselves. Faster, faster, faster still, until they stopped. The final written page, near the bottom. Fresh ink began appearing. Before their eyes, Rose read aloud. Amdis. The writing paused, then continued. Son of... The ink stopped. Nothing more appeared. The sentence remained unfinished. Everyone stared. Lady Isabella whispered, It has never failed to complete a name. Sebastian looked more troubled than Amdis had ever seen him. The book knows. Rose frowned. Then why did it stop? Before Sebastian could answer, a deep voice echoed through the Hall of Ancestors. Not loud, not angry, ancient, measured. It came from everywhere at once. Because... The candles flickered. The blue lantern dimmed. Even Sebastian slowly lowered to one knee. The unseen voice continued. The Father. A long silence followed, then... Still lives. The entire hall froze. Amdis's heartbeat thundered in his ears. Rose stared at him in disbelief. You told me... Your father died before you were born. He looked at her. I believed he had. Far above them, hidden somewhere within Villa Noctis, a single door quietly opened. Someone, or something, had finally returned home. Chapter 13. The Regent's Judgment. The words echoed through the Hall of Ancestors. The Father still lives. No one moved. No one breathed. The candles burned perfectly still, as though even the flames had stopped to listen. Amdis stared at the great book of blood. The unfinished sentence remained upon its page. Amdis, son of... Nothing more. Rose slowly reached for his hand. I know what you told me. He swallowed. My mother... He struggled to find the words. She always said he died before I was born. Lady Isabella lowered her eyes. Perhaps. She believed it. Amdis looked toward the darkness. Who's speaking? Silence. Then the ancient voice answered once more. One who remembers. The voice carried neither anger nor kindness, only authority. It sounded older than the mountain itself. Rose stepped closer to Amdis. If you're going to talk to us, show yourself. A soft chuckle echoed through the hall. Not yet. Sebastian remained on one knee. My lord, forgive me. Amdis looked at him. For what? For allowing you to descend before you were ready. You've been saying that since we arrived. Sebastian raised his head. Because every answer carries a cost. The blue lantern suddenly burned brighter. Its flames stretched almost a foot above the glass. A hidden passage at the far end of the hall slowly opened. No one had touched it. Beyond it lay another chamber, smaller, circular, filled with ancient maps, weapons, family banners, books. At its center stood a single stone table. Nothing else. The unseen voice spoke again. Enter. Sebastian stood. You should go. What about everyone else? Lady Isabella smiled gently. This room is for the Lord of Villa Noctis. Rose immediately answered. Then I'm going too. Sebastian almost smiled. I suspected you would. As Amdis and Rose entered the chamber, the passage quietly sealed behind them. For the first time, they were alone. The room felt strangely peaceful. No menace, no hunger, only history. Amdis approached the stone table. Carved into its surface was a map of Europe. The names of the great houses surrounded it. House Draven, House Varkalak, House Morvain. One place remained blank, the territory surrounding Villa Noctis. Rose ran her fingers across the empty space. They erased your family. Amdis nodded slowly. I think they tried. Suddenly, letters began carving themselves into the stone. Not with chisel, not with magic light. The stone itself seemed to reshape. One sentence appeared. A house dies only when its name is forgotten. Another followed. Remember your name? Then, the carving stopped. Amdis whispered, Athalaric. The room trembled, not violently, almost joyfully. Rose looked at him. What if that's why they erased it? What do you mean? What if? She glanced around the chamber. Names have power. Amdis considered her words. Nothing in this place seemed impossible anymore. The unseen voice returned. This time, it sounded closer. Wise. Rose turned. I can't see you. You are not meant to. Are you a vampire? A long pause, then, no. Both of them froze. Amdis frowned. If you're not a vampire, what are you? Silence. Long enough that he thought the voice had gone. Finally, it answered. I am the keeper. I have guarded this house since before the first family took residence. Rose exchanged a glance with Amdis. This villa existed before the vampires? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Amdis slowly looked around the chamber. So they inherited it. They were chosen. Those 3 words changed everything. Villa Noctis had not been built for vampires. The vampires had once been welcomed into it. The house was older still. Before Amdis could ask another question, a piercing scream echoed through the mountain. Not nearby, above them. Rose's face lost all color. Sebastian! A second scream followed. Then steel clashed against steel. The unmistakable sound of battle. Amdis reached for the passage. It would not open. He struck the stone with his fist. Open! Nothing. The keeper spoke one final time. Its ancient voice carried sorrow. Your first lesson. The sounds of fighting grew louder. Is that a lord cannot save everyone. Amdis struck the wall again. Open the door! Another scream, then silence. The passage slowly slid aside. Amdis and Rose ran into the Hall of Ancestors. Sebastian stood waiting. His black coat was torn. Blood stained one sleeve. Lady Isabella supported a wounded messenger whose arm had been nearly severed. Several candles had been extinguished. For the first time since Amdis arrived, fear had reached the heart of Villa Noctis. Sebastian looked directly at him. They have crossed the covenant. Amdis's breathing quickened. Who? Sebastian's expression hardened. The regent. Amdis frowned. I thought Cassian was the leader. Sebastian slowly shook his head. No. Lord Cassian serves his own house. He looked toward the ceiling, where another distant impact shook the villa. The one coming rules them all. Outside, lightning split the night. Standing beyond the gates of Villa Noctis, surrounded by nearly 100 silent vampires, a lone rider dressed in black looked up at the ancient estate. His crimson eyes never blinked. He smiled and then quietly said, Open the gates. They have hidden the Athalaric long enough, and tonight I shall judge whether he is worthy to live. Chapter 14. The Night of the Covenant. The iron bells rang, once, twice, then without stopping, their deep voices rolled across the mountains like thunder. Rose looked toward the ceiling. What are those? Lady Isabella's face grew pale. They have not rung. For 321 years. Sebastian closed his eyes. The covenant has been broken. Every vampire inside Villa Noctis immediately moved. Gone was the quiet elegance. The musicians became soldiers. The scholars disappeared into hidden corridors. Ancient weapons were removed from walls that moments earlier had appeared decorative. Servants carried silver, iron, and polished ashwood stakes with practiced precision. Amdis watched in disbelief. This place is a fortress. Sebastian nodded. It always was. The front gates exploded inward. The sound echoed through the valley. Ancient oak shattered like glass. Outside, more than 100 mounted vampires waited beneath the moon. None spoke, none moved. They simply watched. At their center, the lone rider slowly removed his hood. His face appeared no older than 40, yet his eyes carried centuries. A long scar crossed his left cheek. His armor was black steel trimmed with crimson. Across his back rested an enormous sword, unlike anything Amdis had ever seen. The blade was nearly 6 feet long. It bore countless ancient names etched into its surface. Rose whispered, "He's beautiful," then immediately corrected herself. "No!" Terrifying. The rider dismounted. Every vampire behind him lowered their heads, not in fear, in respect. He approached the broken gates alone. His boots stopped precisely at the ancient boundary stone. He did not cross. He could not without invitation. "My name," his voice carried effortlessly through the estate, "is Regent Lucien Varkalac. I speak for the council of the remaining houses." Sebastian stepped onto the front terrace. "You speak only for yourself." Lucien smiled, as stubborn as ever. Amdis joined Sebastian. Rose remained beside him. Lucien's eyes settled upon Amdis. For a brief moment, the regent said nothing. His expression changed. Confusion, recognition, then something almost like sadness. So, the blood truly survived. Amdis met his gaze. "You've been looking for me. For many years." "Why?" Lucien answered honestly. "To determine whether history made the correct choice." Rose folded her arms. "What history?" Lucien looked at her with surprising warmth. "You must be Rose." She stiffened. "How do all of you know my name?" "The same way they know yours." He looked toward Villa Noctis. "The house whispers." Rose sighed. "I was afraid you were going to say that." For the first time, a faint smile crossed the regent's face. "So was I." Sebastian's voice became firm. "You have broken sacred law." Lucien nodded. "I have." "You crossed the covenant." "I did." "You destroyed the outer gate." "I did." "You entered Noctis territory with an army." "I did." "Why?" Lucien's smile disappeared. "Because another army follows mine." Silence swept across the courtyard. Lady Isabella whispered, "No." Lucien continued, "They are not here to negotiate. They are not here to judge. They have come to erase." A cold wind swept through the broken gate. Far beyond Lucien's soldiers, dark shapes began appearing among the trees. Hundreds, then more. They did not ride horses. They walked slowly, deliberately. Each carried weapons blacker than the night itself. Unlike Lucien's soldiers, they made no attempt to appear noble. Their armor was jagged, their banners torn, their faces scarred by old battles. One enormous figure dragged a silver coffin chained behind him. The sound of iron scraping stone echoed through the valley. Rose felt the hairs rise on the back of her neck. Who were they? Lucien never looked away from the approaching darkness. The true enemy. One of Sebastian's messengers rushed onto the terrace. "My lord! They've counted over 400. Lady Isabella closed her eyes. "We cannot survive that." Lucien answered quietly, "No, you cannot." He turned back toward Amdis. "This is why I came first." Sebastian stared at him. "You intend to fight beside us?" Lucien looked almost offended. "I intend to prevent the extinction of every noble bloodline still standing." Amdis studied the regent carefully. "You expect me to trust you?" "No," Lucien answered. "I expect you to survive long enough. to decide later whether you should. The honesty caught everyone off guard, even Sebastian. The mountain suddenly shook with violent force. Not from beneath Villa Noctis, from beyond the valley. The approaching army stopped. Its soldiers slowly parted. A path opened through their ranks. Something enormous approached. Heavy footsteps echoed across the stone road. Boom! 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 No one could yet see what was coming, only its shadow. Lucian's face hardened. I prayed he would not come himself. Sebastian whispered, Who? The regent slowly drew the massive sword from his back. Its steel sang beneath the moonlight. Then he spoke the name every vampire present feared. King Malachar. For the first time in over 3 centuries, the last king of the broken houses had come to Villa Noctis in person, and every soul standing within the ancient walls knew, before dawn, the fate of House Noctis, and perhaps the entire vampire world, would be decided. Chapter 15. The Last King. The valley fell silent. Even the wind seemed unwilling to cross the battlefield. Every eye fixed upon the darkness beyond the broken gates. Boom, boom, boom. Each footstep shook the mountain. The army slowly parted. From between their ranks, a single figure emerged. He wore no crown. He needed none. Power clung to him like a living shadow. His armor was forged from black steel, so old it reflected no light. A long crimson cloak trailed behind him across the stone road. At his side hung an ancient sword whose blade was stained a deep, permanent red. Not rust, blood. Centuries of it. His face appeared no older than 35. Yet his eyes had watched kingdoms rise and vanish. Rose instinctively stepped closer to Amdis. Every instinct within her screamed that this was not simply another vampire. This was history, walking. The stranger stopped before the ancient boundary stone. He studied Villa Noctis for several moments. Then his gaze settled upon Amdis. So, his voice was calm. The child survived. Amdis stared back. I don't know you. No, the ancient king nodded. But I knew your father. The words struck harder than any weapon. Amdis took one step forward. You know who he is? I do. Tell me. The king remained silent. Then he slowly shook his head. No. Amdis's temper finally broke. You all keep doing this. You know the truth. You know who I am. You know who my father is. You know why this house called me here. His voice echoed across the valley. But none of you will answer. The king listened patiently. When Amdis finished, he spoke quietly. Because the answers belong to him. Rose looked at the king. Who are you? The stranger bowed with unexpected courtesy. I am Malachar. I was once called King of the 8 Houses. His eyes darkened. Now, I am merely the last king. Lucian Varkolak stepped forward. His great sword pointed toward the ground. You were ordered never to approach Villa Noctis again. Malachar smiled faintly. I've ignored greater orders. You swore an oath. I did. You broke it. I had no choice. Lucian's expression hardened. There is always a choice. Malachar's eyes drifted toward Amdis. Not when history begins repeating itself. Sebastian descended the front steps. For the first time since Amdis had met him, the old butler looked genuinely angry. You have already destroyed enough, Malachar answered softly. Have I? He looked around the estate. It still stands. Because we protected it. No! Malachar's eyes lifted toward the villa. It stands because it chose to. Those words silenced everyone. Even Sebastian, far beneath the mountain, the unseen keeper, spoke. Only Amdis heard the voice. Listen, judge them, not by what they claim, but by what they fear. Amdis looked carefully at every face before him. Sebastian, Lady Isabella, Lucian, Malachar. Each feared something different, and somehow, each believed they were protecting him. Malachar slowly removed a leather pouch from beneath his cloak. He tossed it gently across the boundary. It landed at Amdis's feet. I did not come to kill you. I came to return what belongs to your family. Amdis carefully opened the pouch. Inside, wrapped in faded blue cloth, lay an old pocket watch. Its silver casing was scratched with age. On the inside cover, one sentence had been engraved. To my son, if you are reading this, I failed to come home. Amdis stopped breathing. His hands trembled. He recognized the handwriting, his mother's keepsake, the same elegant script that had written every birthday card she had ever given him. Rose whispered, Amdis. He looked up at Malachar. Where did you get this? The ancient king answered with quiet sorrow. I promised your father that if I ever found you, I would place it back into your hands. Amdis closed the watch. For the first time, he no longer saw a monster standing beyond the gate. He saw an old soldier carrying a promise for decades. Before another word could be spoken, the sky erupted. A deafening roar rolled across the valley. Not thunder, not an explosion, something alive. Every vampire looked upward. A shadow passed across the full moon. Once, then again. Rose stared into the heavens. What is that? The shadow descended through the clouds. Massive wings spread across the night. Ancient, powerful, neither bird nor bat. Its cry shook the mountains. Malachar slowly closed his eyes. I prayed they would never awaken. The keeper's voice echoed once more inside Amdis's mind. The first war has begun again, and for the first time since Villa Noctis called him home, Amdis realized the struggle before him was never merely about vampires. It was about something far older, something that even kings feared. The mountain had awakened. Chapter 16, Home. The creature circled above Villa Noctis. Its enormous wings covered the moon. No one moved. Not Malachar, not Lucian, not Sebastian. Not even the armies gathered beyond the shattered gates. For the first time that night, every enemy looked upward together. The cry came again, ancient, mournful, as though it were searching for someone it had not seen in centuries. Rose looked at Amdis. What is it? Before anyone else could answer, the keeper spoke within Amdis's mind. A witness. It has come to see who answers the house. The great beast descended only once. It never landed. It simply swept low over Villa Noctis. As it passed above Amdis, its golden eyes met his. Time seemed to stop. Then, it climbed back into the clouds. The valley fell silent once more. Malachar slowly released the breath he had been holding. It has accepted him. Lucian nodded. So it has. Neither man seemed pleased, only relieved. Amdis stepped toward the broken gate. Sebastian immediately moved beside him. My lord, Amdis raised a hand. No. If this house has chosen me, then I will meet them as its master. He stopped at the ancient boundary stone, the invisible line that no vampire could cross without invitation. He looked first at Lucian, then at Malachar, then at the armies waiting behind them. I don't know your world. I don't know your history, and I don't know why all of you believe my family matters. He glanced back at Rose. But I do know this. This house became our home the day we walked through its doors. He faced the gathered vampires once more. And I will not let anyone destroy my home. The valley remained perfectly still. Then, unexpectedly, Malachar knelt. The last king lowered one knee to the earth. A ripple spread through the armies behind him, one after another. His soldiers knelt as well. Lucian watched for a long moment. Then he too lowered his head. Even the warriors of House Draven followed. Rose looked at Sebastian. What are they doing? The old butler smiled. They are acknowledging the decision of the house. Amdis shook his head. I haven't accepted anything. Sebastian answered gently. No, but neither have you refused. Far beyond the valley, a distant war horn echoed. Once, twice, 3 times. The darker army began withdrawing into the forest, not defeated, not destroyed, simply leaving. Malachar watched them disappear. He has seen enough, Rose frowned. Who? The old king looked toward the trees. The one truly commanding this war. Why leave? Because tonight was never about conquest. It was about confirmation. A cold realization settled over the valley. They had all been tested. Someone hidden in the darkness now knew that the heir of Villa Noctis lived. Dawn slowly approached. The first rays of sunlight touched the distant mountains. Lucian soldiers stepped beneath heavy cloaks. Others retreated toward the trees. Malachar fastened his crimson cloak. He looked at Amdis one final time. When the time comes, open the pocket watch again. It contains more than a letter. Before Amdis could ask another question, Malachar turned. His army departed in complete silence. Within minutes, the valley stood empty. Only broken gates remained as proof they had ever come. The sun climbed above the mountains. Golden light washed across Villa Noctis. For the first time, the estate no longer looked abandoned. It looked alive. Birds returned to the gardens. The fountain began flowing again. Roses bloomed along the stone walls where none had grown the day before. Rose laughed softly. I think the house is happy, Sebastian smiled. I believe it is. Later that morning, Amdis and Rose stood together on the highest balcony overlooking the valley. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally, Rose slipped her hand into his. When we bought this place, I thought we'd spend the summer repainting walls. Amdis laughed. So did I. She rested her head against his shoulder. Do you regret it? He looked over the mountains, at the village below, at the ancient forests, at Villa Noctis itself. Then he smiled. No, I've never felt more at home. Deep beneath the mountain, inside a chamber no one had yet entered, the empty throne remained untouched. The keeper stood unseen beside it. Its ancient voice echoed through the darkness. The house has chosen, the blood has returned. The heir has not yet taken his seat, and that is why there is still hope. The blue flame within the hidden chamber burned brighter than it had in 3 centuries. On a forgotten wall, an old map slowly changed. The name that had been erased for generations appeared once more. House Noctis, far across the sea, in a castle buried beneath snow and stone. A lone figure watched the same name appear upon an ancient map. The stranger smiled. So, the house lives. He quietly closed the map. Prepare my ship. It's time to go home. Epilogues. Some houses are purchased, others are inherited, and a rare few choose their own family. Villa Noctis had waited through centuries of silence, through betrayal, through war, through forgotten names. It had not waited for a king. It had waited for a man whose first instinct was not to rule, but to protect. And somewhere beneath its ancient halls, history was no longer sleeping. It was remembering. End of Book 1. The Blood of Villa Noctis. Thank you for listening to The Blood of Villa Noctis. We hope you enjoyed this journey into a world of ancient bloodlines, forgotten kingdoms, and a house that waited centuries for its rightful heir. But this is only the beginning. The story of Amdis, Rose, and Villa Noctis is far from over. Another book is already on the horizon, where new allies will rise, old enemies will return, and the secrets buried beneath Villa Noctis will finally begin to awaken. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like this video, subscribe to UPRI Audiobooks, and ring the notification bell so you'll be among the first to hear the next chapter in this unforgettable saga. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, may your nights be filled with wonder, and may you never fear the shadows.